Hello, I'm Pip Courtney and welcome to a new year of Landline. Coconut oil fell out of favour last century, but an Australian scientist is helping a Pacific nation on the coconut comeback trail, as Sean Murphy reports.
They're modern-day missionaries spreading a gospel of economic development for some of the poorest people on the planet. Agricultural economist Dr. Dan Etherington has been coming to the Solomon Islands since 1981. Now he's sharing his passion with his family.
This is such a beautiful place. I love it. And to come in on the boat with my son, who's an agriculturalist and has grasped the vision, and to have my grandson as well helping in a significant way on this venture is amazing.
You hear those conch shells?
On the western end of Guadalcanal Island, the warriors of Sumate honour Dr. Dan's party with a traditional challenge and welcome. There is warmth and respect like this across the Solomons for the 79-year-old. Humble by nature, the man known here as Dr. Dan has spent much of his working life studying coconuts and their impact on traditional communities.
I've never experienced anything like this before. It frankly brings me to tears. It is an incredible experience to have a welcome like this and for what we've done. And I'm totally overwhelmed.
Coconuts are known as the tree of life, surviving cyclones and tsunamis and sustaining indigenous peoples for generations. But when Dr. Dan first came to the Solomons, they were a neglected resource.
As a cash crop, it has been so abused, and as an economist, I was concerned that you're getting nothing for it. As one of the producers said, God is raining money down on us, and we don't know it, and we don't recognize it. And it's a money tree, but they weren't actually getting value for the work that they did.
Dr. Dan has developed a system called direct micro-expelling, or DME, and it's the basis of an emerging virgin coconut oil industry. The coconuts are cut open, their meat is shredded and then dried on a specially designed heating table. It's then packed into cylinders and cold pressed with a low-tech manual device. Dr. Dan invented the press after experimenting with a corking gun.
What we've come up with is the fastest method of producing the oil, where from the time that you open a coconut to the time you get the oil can be in under 1 hour.
Before the DME, copra production was the only income from the Solomons' vast coconut resource, estimated to be around 390,000 hectares. Copra is a traditional industry where the coconut flesh is cut and dried for export to be processed into a low-grade oil. Copra is one of the world's most volatile markets, and it's often not even worth drying out at this village level for processing overseas. It's hot, hard, dirty work, and it's been likened by some to a form of slavery. Copra is still a mainstay of the Solomons' rural economy and was the nation's first export industry. In the early 20th century, the oil produced was the world's most popular edible oil and the base ingredient for soap production. War in the Pacific broke the copra industry's supply chain.
A fleet of merchantmen accompany warships on a secret mission.
And soon after, a new war on saturated fat broke what was left of the coconut oil industry. But more recently, there's been a backlash.
Now there's just the most remarkable demand for this virgin coconut oil worldwide, and nobody knows how it's going to finish up, because we're still up against the authorities who are locked into that 50-year-old advice about coconut being a saturated oil and therefore a heart risk.
Coconut oil may be enjoying a resurgence, but Australia's National Health and Medical Research Council still says its consumption should be limited. In its revised dietary guide in 2013, it found there was insufficient evidence to change this finding.
I guess for a long time we were telling people how good this oil was and how good it was for them, dietary-wise, and people weren't convinced. In the last 3 years there's been a big turnaround in the market, and people now understand the value of coconut oil, and so that has enabled us to expand. The market's grown and we're able to grow with it.
Trading as Coconut Pacific New Life, the Etheringtons are riding a new wave of popularity for coconut oil. They've been marketing their Solomons-produced certified organic oil and cosmetics for the last decade. They're also manufacturing the DME presses and have sold the technology in a dozen countries. Their Canberra-based business is operated as a social enterprise.
Our aim is to make a profit because we have to be a sustainable business, but our objective is not to make a fortune for ourselves, but rather to reinvest that money into our greater goal, our greater mission, which is to help the islands, to help the coconut communities, to improve their livelihoods and to get out of the poverty they're in.
Last year, the United Nations ranked the Solomon Islands near the bottom out of 187 countries for its Human Development Index. Gross domestic product, the value of goods and services produced here, is among the lowest in the region at around $2,000 per person. The Solomon Islands is one of the most aid-dependent countries in the world.
There's about 85% of the population are living in this rural subsistence, and some describe it as sort of affluent subsistence, and so life's not too difficult for most, although with the increasing population, that's slowly changing. And so, you're living a lifestyle where you go to the garden when you need to, you go fishing when you need to. So this year we expect to export at least 160 tonnes of certified organic VCO. That's at least be a 25% increase on what we produced last year if we do that.
Bob Pollard runs Coconut Pacific Solomon Islands. At a recent Australia Pacific Islands Business Council forum in Honiara, he told delegates the biggest challenge in developing the virgin coconut oil industry is finance. At a cost of 23,000 Australian dollars, the DME system is beyond the reach of most villages.
That's the problem. Banks aren't able to lend to people in villages. They don't have security, financial records, and so this is a major obstacle that our industry faces, the financial entry barrier.
It's something the Australian government has been working on as part of its development assistance to the Solomon Islands.
In fact, we are doing quite a bit in that area. in terms of economic empowerment, particularly for rural people and particularly for women. So we've worked with both, or are working with both ANZ and Westpac, for example, to help roll out banking services to rural areas through mobile phone banking technology. And in the last year alone, that's enabled 10,000 rural women to open bank accounts for the first time. We're also working with the World Bank Rural Development Program, which is giving people alternative sources of livelihood, so they can raise a bit of capital. They can do things like start savings clubs and start to access what we would consider kind of normal basic financial services for the first time.
High Commissioner Andrew Byrne says investor confidence is returning to the Solomons after ethnic tribal unrest crippled the economy at the beginning of this century. A regional peacekeeping operation has been downscaled to training and advice for local police. The High Commissioner says developing a virgin coconut oil industry can deliver important social and economic benefits for the Solomon Islands.
This technology can help give young rural people a source of livelihood that they wouldn't otherwise have in their village. It reduces the incentive to drift into places like Honiara, where often, they're unemployed, they're hanging around and unable to find employment here and become frustrated and turn to things like alcohol and crime. So potentially it has a really positive social impact right across the country.
Dr. Dan says the Solomon Islands can prosper with the right sort of development opportunities. Coconut Pacific has installed about 40 DME systems across the archipelago, and it believes up to 300 could be operating within a few years.
Get past the troubles and you get peace and people who really are willing to work hard and are very generous in their hospitality out of what they've got. And I think that's a critical thing here, where this is all developed out of what the people themselves have, and it's just enabled them to make best use of it. Hello, Annette.
Hello, Dr. Dan. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to Berahui.
Hello. Very good to see you. I'm very pleased to see you.
Nice to meet you too.
At Veracue Village, Dent and Annette Somar bought a DME last year. They employ 7 people and buy coconuts from farmers who now earn more money than they used to from copra production.
We produce within 2 weeks. I think it will take 2 months for the copra cutter to earn the same amount of money. The benefit coming out of the DME is going out mainly to the farmers, where they help out to meet the daily necessity of the family, the school fees, clothing, the food, all that for the families.
According to Annette Somar, it's also made a huge difference to women who mostly work unpaid on domestic duties and have few opportunities to earn cash.
The girls here, they were very happy to do this one because all along, all they have to do when they drop out at school, they just come home and then they go to the garden and they have to cut copra to earn money, or they have to climb betel nuts, earn money, find leaves for chewing betel nut, for them to sell. When we bring this DME, they find it a bit easier to get money for themselves.
I, as the Minister responsible for agriculture, would like to thank KPSI and Coconut Pacific Australia for making it possible for many rural families to improve their standard of living. We hope the industry will find its way to all communities in the country so that we can do away with copra altogether.
In his travels around the islands, Dr. Dan says he's been impressed by the innovative ways that communities with little experience of the market economy have adapted to the realities of running a business.
You've got to trust them to find ways that it doesn't disrupt the society. You can't live their lives for them, but they are highly intelligent people. They don't want their societies to be disrupted, and I believe that they will make best use of it.
Dr. Dan says his Christian faith has guided his career, and he's eternally grateful to have had the chance to make a difference and help traditional communities develop at their own pace with their own resources.
The returns that they're getting through the whole community, through the village, is, by village standards, extraordinary. And that is very rewarding.
When the big Simplot factory closed down in northern Tasmania, one farmer took a punt on growing a vegetable he knew nothing about. But as Fiona Breen found out, he is now a rhubarb expert.
For decades, this paddock has been home to traditional crops destined for the vegetable processing factory in Scottsdale. This area of Tasmania once supplied 85% of the nation's frozen peas and beans. Today, there's not a pea or a bean in sight.
In 2003, they shut the doors there. And prior to that, they did quite a lot of vegetables. Back after the war, the area was famous for supplying our soldiers through with, you know, all their ration packs were grown and made from this area.
International food processing giant Simplot centralised its Tasmanian factories in the state's northwest. For Scottsdale farmers, the costs of getting produce to the factory skyrocketed.
Were you prepared when Simplot left?
I think people probably were prepared, but in saying that, it's like having a relative that's got a terminal disease. You know, you think you're ready, but when they pass on, it's always a shock, and it was a bit like that.
It was a killer blow for some farms. Properties were sold, others were merged, some were able to diversify.
The margins got finer. Our distance and proximity to the processing plant means that we've lost those processing crops, which is, you know, was part of the reason we started looking towards something else, and it was, yeah, just fortunate really that the rhubarb came along.
Luck was on Gerard Nichols' side. A chance encounter with a rhubarb grower from Queensland set him on a new path. Desperate to stay in farming, he took the plunge and planted rhubarb, a vegetable he knew little about.
It's very unpredictable. It's a perennial crop, so you get, with any perennial crop, you get a period coming out of dormancy where it'll jump away, but that's sort of determined by the season too. It sort of needs that dormant period to build up the energy to go again. But yeah, being perennial, you know, you've got issues with weed control. Once you've got a crop in the ground, you've committed to that crop for 5 or 6 years.
Planting, propagation and disease control were all unknown. There were plenty of mistakes made, but Gerard Nichols persisted.
We basically sink or swim and you work things out, so that's been good. It's been challenging.
10 years after the first plantings, he's Australia's biggest rhubarb grower, with 80 acres planted. He's harvesting the plants 4 times a year. Rhubarb makes up 13% of the farm's business, but 50% of its income, and that figure is climbing.
It's certainly made our future, it gave us some direction, and it's given us something to focus on, and it's given us something that we can have confidence in. It's been a real winner, and it's thrown a lot of challenges at us, and I think that's a good thing too. You need to have some challenges. There was no handbook on how to go about it. For us, it's been a real win. It's only just coming out of winter, so a lot of the stems are a bit thinner than what you'd ideally like for the supermarket, but...
It may be a real winner, but rhubarb sales are determined by the big supermarkets, and they say customers won't buy if it's not perfect.
Yeah, this one here, for instance, he's had a bit of wind damage up the side. He's cracked through there. We're only allowed 10-cent pieces worth of marking on any given stalk, so it's a reasonable tolerance.
On the main harvest days, only the best rhubarb stalks are picked. The rest is left for the next cut of seconds.
He's not going to make supermarket grade. He's got a bit of fungal, a bit of wind damage.
Up to 60% of a rhubarb crop is waste. In the early days, it was simply thrown out. That was until his enterprising cousin came to visit.
Jan Hughes and her husband Holger returned to live in Scottsdale after 20 years in Tanzania. Living in a third world country had taught them to avoid waste. They were shocked by the amount of rhubarb thrown out.
He was utilising the first grade stalks for the eastern seaboard market of Woolworths, and all the others was being just thrown away, just a natural waste of beautiful food, and we saw an opportunity there to value add.
The couple scoured recipe books, experimenting in their home kitchen with rhubarb seconds.
We started Rubrew as a business in 2008, and our first foray into it really was purely experimental at the kitchen table and the kitchen sink, and it wasn't until September 2009 that we had anything ready for the market.
6 years later, they're producing 18 rhubarb products and have managed to get a couple of those into the major supermarket chains, including thousands of pouches of rhubarb compote each year. They've moved from the kitchen to a small factory and are employing a handful of locals.
The rhubarb comes in from the farm where it's already gone through the washing machine, so it's relatively clean. We top and tail here if that's necessary, put it back through a washer. Holger has invented a chopping machine, and it's all chopped and then it's packed in bags or put in the boiler if we're making jam, in the bags if we're making compote, and goes through the processing. So the syrup's added, it's cooked if it needs to be through the water bath, and then if it's a jam, the jars are filled, sterilised through the water bath.
For Gerard Nichols, it's a win-win. He's still running a mixed farming operation with beef and fat lambs, onions, poppies and potatoes. But the rhubarb crops are successful and there's plans to produce more.
The demand's it's surprised us. It's probably been bolstered a little bit with the likes of your Jamie Olivers and that, who have used in a lot of these cooking shows. It's become fashionable, I think. And particularly the red variety, it's made a real resurgence. And I still think there is probably room to grow a bit more. We've just come back into the market after our winter break, and because there was a shortage in that period of time we were out, the price had got pushed to ridiculous levels, and you've seen a lot of consumer rebellion against, and it takes a little while to get them back on side. So we need to maintain a consistent price right through a growing season, get people used to walking into the supermarket.
The next step is growing rhubarb all year round. This year they'll be dividing crowns and replanting. They're also planning to grow rhubarb under wind tunnels.
Our aim over the next couple of seasons is to be able to fill that last couple of months. We've got a plan in place for this coming season, and hopefully that'll see us fill most of that gap. We'll see how that goes.
Ten years after the local vegetable processing plant closed in northeast Tasmania, the farming landscape has changed dramatically, but things are looking a lot brighter.
I think a lot of people just threw their hands in the air and said, well, that's it, we're screwed. But, if you're passionate about something, you find a way to make things happen.
That's it for this week, but A Taste of Landline will be back on Friday night at 8 p.m. It's our summer series with a special emphasis on food and produce. I hope you can join us then.